I am digging in Russia. Introduction. www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Li Wei's chance encounter has opened up a choice beyond planning. His figure can be seen in the vast plains of the lower Volga River and the endless plains of Siberia. Searching for the ruins of World War II, searching for the remains of ancient creatures in permafrost, I am digging for treasures in the wasteland, which is also a way of life. Luosong Soup, large https://www.zhaoshuyuan.com. An unexpected trip. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Li Wei was still soundly asleep, sweet in his dream with a girl who couldn't see clearly but had a great figure. But the next moment he woke up from his dream with a start because his rough roommate kicked him over. The young man with a high nose bridge and clear facial contours asked directly, "How is your vacation schedule?" "Sleep, maybe consider going back to China." Li Wei rubbed his eyes and roast, "Sergey, I want to sleep. Our summer vacation lasts for 2 months. If you don't return to your home country, you can find a job," Sergey Androvich Ivanov said directly. "You can't stay at school or in the dormitory all the time, or you can also consider studying hard." Sergey Androvich Ivanov, this is naturally the standard Russian name. Sergey is the first name, Androvich is the father's surname, this is Andrei's son, Ivanov is the surname. Li Wei became depressed and said, "Do you think I don't want to go back? When I go back to China from St. Petersburg, I still need a connecting flight, which usually takes more than 12 hours, or even 20.4 hours. And you have to know that the airfare is very expensive, it will cost over 45,000 rubles. In 2017, the exchange rate between the Chinese yuan and the ruble was basically 1 yuan to 8.6413 rubles. The minimum round-trip airfare for a trip back home is over 7,000 renminbi. If you can't get a discounted ticket, it will exceed 10,000 renminbi. Although the family's economic conditions are relatively well off, over 4 years of studying abroad have also put considerable financial pressure on the family. Li Wei is an international student. It's just that he's not the type with excellent grades, he's self-funded. When he was in his 3rd year of high school, seeing that his undergraduate degree was hopeless, his family came up with a way to get him an international student status. The expenses in Europe, America, Japan, and South Korea are too high, and Southeast Asian families feel chaotic. Russia became his choice because his family only saved some money by selling fertilizers in the small town. The annual tuition fee for a 1-year preparatory course, combined with my current junior year, is actually around 15,000 renminbi. If we include the expenses, it's basically around 1,500 per month, and we can actually afford it. But the problem is that Levi's school is located in St. Petersburg, Leningrad Oblast, on the Baltic Sea coast in northwestern Russia. His school is also not St. Petersburg State University, which has a relatively high QS ranking, or St. Petersburg State Technical University, which was attended by a large number of Chinese students in the 1950s. He is located at the Russian State Normal University, which is the oldest and only normal university in Russia with a national name. But Li Wei is also studying the Department of Social Sciences, and like many people who come out to study abroad, he writes about some humanities majors. And Li Wei also understood that after graduating next year, he is likely to have a Red Book graduation certificate, which is somewhat different from a formal graduation certificate. Others have a master's degree in water, and even his undergraduate degree is relatively mediocre. What's even more alarming is that sea turtles in China are not as popular now, perhaps because some people are gradually realizing that some international students are just trying to get their education. International students with real talents are still popular, but those like Li Wei may not have strong competitiveness. Sergey didn't plan to go into too much detail, saying his own thoughts, "If you don't come back to China during the summer vacation, you can come to my house as a guest." Li Wei immediately remained skeptical and asked cautiously, "I know your home is not in the city, isn't it that I'm going to dig potatoes?" We must maintain a cautious and skeptical attitude, as it is potatoes that have saved the lives of Russians. Here, There are various ways of using potatoes as ingredients, which naturally means that many places have grown a lot of potatoes. It goes without saying that some farms in the Far East and Siberia are mostly mechanical or artificial, but in some ordinary households, they also grow potatoes. Sergei's eyes were serious as he looked at Li Wei and said, "It's not the season to harvest potatoes now, you can rest assured." Li Wei remained skeptical, "But I remember during the summer vacation, it was your season to harvest potatoes. I don't need you to grow potatoes at home. I will take you swimming, boating, and fishing. You should know that there are the Volga and Don rivers there." Sergei's home is in Volgograd, with a pleasant climate, beautiful scenery, and abundant resources, and has always been known as the southern granary of Russia. And it's very famous there, formerly known as Stalingrad, which was almost replaced by the Battle of Pinyan County as the turning point of World War II. Li Wei was tempted, but still a little worried. "Is there enough room in your house?" The reason for saying this is also very simple, simply because many Russian families do not have very comfortable living conditions. Li Wei said directly, "Just like now, we have one room each. Think about it, for the next 2 months, you can go fishing and camping with me, we can go mushroom picking and horse riding together. But if you stay here, you can only play games and sleep in the dormitory. The difference here is too big." Seeing Li Wei wavering, Sergei intensified his efforts and said, "You will graduate next year and you will be going back. You are my best friend, and I am also your best friend, but it may be difficult for us to have the opportunity to meet again in the future. This holiday is very important, and we can leave many beautiful memories." Li Wei was tempted, "So let's take action. I was convinced by you, we'll be ready to leave immediately." Li Wei was deceived because Sergei's home is in Volgograd Oblast, located in the southeast of the Eastern European plain. Simply put, it is a distance of 1,500 kilometers, and it takes more than 2.5 hours for a direct flight. Even cheaper tickets cost 1,000 yuan. Zhaozhuiyuan.com. Li Wei province can still be taken out, but Sergei is enough. This looks like 13,000 rubles, while the average monthly income of Russians is 50,000 rubles. This is a train that will take more than 10 hours, and Li Wei sits on the train in frustration. He now carefully analyzed that Sergei's enthusiastic invitation was indeed true. But obviously, that guy just feels that the journey is too far, it's okay to find someone to talk to on the way. Forget it. Take it as you come. Roast belongs to roast. But it's also good to go to Volgograd this holiday. To be honest, Li Wei has been studying abroad for 4 years, and his activity trajectory is basically in St. Petersburg. It's also great to appreciate different scenery and culture, it's better than staying in the dormitory and daydreaming all the time. After more than 10 hours of travel, Levi was already exhausted and finally arrived at Volgograd. It has to be said that the artistic aesthetics of Russians have always been online, and there is no need to say much about sculptures, paintings, and so on. Many train stations and subway stations are also built like museums. Leaving the station, Li Wei asked, "How long will it take to get to your home?" "We need to wait for the bus. My home is very close here, less than 50 kilometers away." Sergei was a little excited and felt like an arrow heading home. "Kamasin, it's right by the Volga River. Li Wei has no power to roast. When he comes here, he can't give up halfway." Boom! Suddenly, a muffled thunder sounded, and Li Wei felt a tingling sensation spreading from the sky to the coccyx. After shaking, Li Wei roast, "Look, God is not satisfied with your lies, and is warning you." Sergei had a thick skin and said, "I believe in God, and your heavens cannot control me." Second plot development error. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Wei felt that he had been deceived by this bastard Sergei, who had tricked him into Kamasin in Volgograd. Some cities in Russia have good public transportation, but when it comes to small areas, it becomes more difficult. Although Russia used to have developed heavy industry and a per capita GDP of $10,000. But if we really want to talk about how developed this place is, it's hard to say. In Li Wei's understanding, the overall income of Russians seems to be not very high. However, various benefits are relatively good. Leaving aside medical expenses and the like, it seems that seeking medical treatment doesn't require much money, but it requires queuing and making appointments, which cannot be solved in just 1 or 2 days. The main reason is that the overall housing prices are relatively low. For example, the average housing price in St. Petersburg is over 10,000 yuan per square meter, with better areas around 20,000 yuan and more high-end areas around 30,000 yuan. There is no concept of shared housing. Moreover, there are particularly many holidays in Russia, in addition to federal holidays and local holidays. Generally speaking, there are at least 25 days of public holidays per year, which are paid ones. So Russians generally have an attitude that work belongs to work and life belongs to life. You may not earn a lot of money, but life must be enjoyable. Dragging their suitcases and carrying large backpacks, Li Wei and Sergei got off the car and walked towards the edge of the town. My home is ahead. Sergei pointed excitedly ahead and said, "Look, it's right there." In Li Wei's impression, a typical characteristic of Russian residential buildings is woodcut corrugated, which has the advantages of being warm in winter and cool in summer, sturdy and durable. Especially in some rural or urban areas, there are more woodcut edges. The Sergei family, on the other hand, is not considered a more formal woodcut ridge, but more like a wooden house. Don't worry about not having a place to live, it looks like 5 or 6 wooden houses. And there is a wooden wall surrounding it, which looks even bigger. Dad, Mom. Sergei slammed the door and shouted loudly, "I'm Xiaoyaosha, I'm back." Xiaoyaosha, also known as Sergei's nickname, is a commonly used nickname between family members and those with close relationships. Using nicknames between people who are not in close relationships often indicates contempt for each other. A deep voice came from the yard, "Xiaoyaosha, my beloved son." The next moment, the courtyard door was opened, and a bald man over 1.8 meters tall and strong like a bear ran out. He happily hugged Sergei and kissed him hard on the face. This is very normal. Although some people think that Russians are generally serious, after spending a long time together, they know that the people here are also quite rough and straightforward, and their emotions are also relatively outgoing. While Andrei Petrovich Ivanov was holding Sergei, a chubby old lady ran over and kissed Sergei's face as she bent down. This is Maria Valerievna Ivanova, Sergei's mother. Russian women changed their surname to husband after getting married. Sergei broke free from his parents' embrace and said, "Dad and Mom, this is the Li Wei I often introduce to you. You can call him Li or Wei, but his favorite is still his full name Li Wei." Andrei immediately reached out his hand and said seriously, "Young man, welcome to Volgograd, welcome to Ivanov's house." Li Wei immediately reached out his hand, knowing that the serious way of greeting Russian men is by shaking hands. Even between brothers, they often shake hands first when meeting. "Mr. Ivanov, I'm glad to be here," said Li Wei with a firm handshake. Maria also opened her hand at this moment, and Li Wei didn't feel uncomfortable at all. This is the habit here, and a face-to-face gift is very normal. On the outside, Sergei's home may seem quite large, but in reality, upon entering, he found it not very large. Apart from the warehouse, 2 of the 5 or 6 rooms can be considered as rooms. The living room is relatively small, at most only about 20 square meters. However, it also has to be lamented that people in Russia still enjoy life. Although the family's economic conditions may not be very good, Sergei's parents still planted many flowers in the yard. Sergei was very happy and naturally couldn't rest when he returned home. After Levi had just put down the Soviet red vodka and macaron he had brought, he immediately dragged Levi out of the living room. Li Wei exclaimed that he had been deceived because he saw the vegetable field and the lush green potato vines. He was coming to dig potatoes. Adam. Sergei ignored Levi's change in expression and shouted loudly at a big dog with a shoulder height of over 60 centimeters and a weight of at least 60 kilograms. Adam, I'm back. Adam, this is the Ivanov family dog, a powerful and burly Caucasian dog. Children, I have prepared red vegetable soup and dumplings. Maria walked to the door and shouted with a smile, Xiao Yao Sha, you are the master. You should take care of your friends, this is the most basic courtesy and enthusiasm. Sergei immediately said, don't worry about him. He knows we are very busy, so he is willing to help us dig potatoes. Li Wei was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood, which was the result of making friends carelessly. Even though I was very cautious, I still couldn't escape the fate of digging potatoes. Maria smiled and said, that would be great. Your father and I are still discussing how to start digging potatoes when you come back. Vanya and Alina both need our potatoes. We will start digging potatoes tomorrow and then deliver them to Volgograd. Vanya, this is also the nickname of Ivan, Sergei's brother. Alina is Sergei's sister. Sergei is the youngest in the family, and there are 3 of them in Russia that are neither too many nor too few, and even in the eyes of some families, they belong to the category of relatively few. Returning to the living room, Sergei was teasing cats while drinking red vegetable soup. Russians love cats very much. As for Li Wei, he is also used to red vegetable soup and feels that the taste is good. But the dumplings are a bit unbearable, even after living and studying here for 4 years, he still can't accept the thick dumpling skin with cream filling inside. And Li Wei's hometown is in the central province, where rice is the main food and he can't eat dumplings a few times a year. Eating dumplings, Li Wei was looking around when suddenly his eyes lit up. Sergei suddenly became nervous and warned, Levi, that's my sister, she's also older than you. Li Wei, with thick skin, smiled and said, I am also 1 year older than you. I studied in the preparatory program for a year. She won't like you, Sergei said decisively. She likes strong men. You're too thin and your muscles aren't well developed. And she's very serious and doesn't like you, a frivolous and smiling man. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Li Wei cannot accept this evaluation. He is sunny and likes to joke, which is not frivolous. Maria, who was originally just sitting next to her, suddenly said, our daughter won't go abroad. If you're willing to stay in Russia and Volgograd, I'll help you. This is naturally just a joke. Although many people say that there are more boys and girls in Russia, there are also more outstanding girls who are not lacking in suitors. Li Wei smiled and asked, is she a police officer? Andrei immediately said proudly, yes, she works in the Internal Affairs Force, she is a federal police officer. In short, the Russian internal affairs are divided into federal police and regional police. In terms of nature and tasks, the Russian internal security forces are similar to the armed police in Chinese mainland. Sergei roast, she is not in service, she is just a civilian. After finishing these words, Sergei warned, I think you already know how scared you are. You know how terrifying the police here are. Li Wei didn't say much, he knows that many Russian police officers are actually quite dark. However, looking at Alina's photo, Li Wei seems to have gained a lot of courage, probably because he wanted to see the color. After joking and eating and drinking, Li Wei took a good shower and then went to rest. After running around for almost a day, I have already felt a bit tired. As for digging potatoes or Alina, let's talk about it after waking up. The world is vast, and it's not as important now as taking a good rest. But I still need to complain about Sergei. This bastard really turned him back to dig potatoes. According to the development of this plot, fishing, swimming, hunting, or camping are likely to be ruined. This won't work. I'm here on vacation, not to work as a laborer. I have superpowers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Wei really felt cheated because he was really going to dig potatoes now. Fortunately, although it is not completely mechanized, harvesting potatoes is not particularly tiring. His task was to chop off the stems and leaves, while Sergei pushed a small shovel to dig out round and rolling potatoes. Bending down to pick up a fist-sized potato, Li Wei couldn't help but sigh, the potatoes here are really nice in size. Sergei proudly said, of course, we have always chosen excellent potato varieties. They are big and delicious. Li Wei, you should thank me for allowing you to experience the joy of living in the countryside. Li Wei is not grateful at all. His hometown is in a township, and although he doesn't farm, he is surrounded by some farmland. He is not yet indiscriminate, at most sometimes he is not particularly familiar with some agricultural practices. However, looking at the soil under his feet, Li Wei still said, your soil is really fertile. Sergei didn't quite understand, isn't soil always like this? Li Wei didn't know what to say, even though Russia is located in high-latitude areas, it seems to be relatively cold. But in many places, except for some relatively desert areas, there is fertile black soil. The soil looks somewhat granular and moist, and there is still some difference in fertility compared to the soil in my hometown. No wonder Russia, despite becoming one of the world's largest granaries, has always been at the forefront of wheat exports and so on. Suddenly, Li Wei felt something was wrong and quickly said, let's exchange jobs. I can't continue cutting stems and leaves. Sergei felt a bit regretful and continued to struggle, but you don't know how to operate it, you can't find the potato. Li Wei sneered and said rudely, I won't be fooled again. Cutting stems and leaves is the most tiring thing. Since Li Wei has reacted, Sergei can only choose to accept a new job. The reason is also very simple. Cutting stems and leaves requires frequent bending, which is the most tiring part. Pushing a forklift to flip potatoes out may require some effort, but it is much easier than cutting stems and leaves. Good brothers are meant to be fooled. If we can't be fooled by them, life will lose a lot of fun. Andrei walked over and asked with a smile, Li Wei, do you need any help? No need, Li Wei confidently revealed his big white teeth and said, I'm very strong. Maybe you don't know, I've always enjoyed outdoor sports. My absolute strength is not as good as Sergei's, but my endurance and coordination are both excellent. Andrei joked, you don't need to prove this to me. Tomorrow you have a chance to prove it in front of Alina. Li Wei joked, I have to be smarter. Have you watched how I became a Russian? I have to deal with you first so that I can get more opportunities. Are you Rome? Andrei joked, it's a pity that I'm not a millionaire and can't give you all the good things. But my Irina is much more beautiful than Anna, and you must admit that. When Sergei was cutting the stem and leaf, he roast, I am Rome, and Li Wei is the unlucky reporter. Alina is indeed more rude than Anna, but I don't have a rich girlfriend. Andrei glanced at Sergei and roast, this is your learning achievement in St. Petersburg. I have always told you that you need to study hard so that you can find a good job. But you should also pursue those attractive girls in the university and see what you have done. Do you only know how to study all day? Pointing to Levi, Sergei said, we went on a trip with this guy. We've all been to Neva Street, Winter Palace, and Summer Palace. And we also often go fishing and swimming in the river. We tried boating and surfing in the Gulf of Finland. My university was very exciting. I don't have enough time to play, where is there any other idea of dating? Maria's face showed a helpless smile as she said, you should learn from Vanya. He's getting married this year. Sergei was also quite speechless, somewhat uncertain. Did he start dating at the age of 15 or 16? Time flies so fast, it's already 10 years. 15, 16, in Russia, it's not really considered early love. Sometimes, parents of both parties who live together don't have much opinion. If you think about it, there are still some differences, the age of high school students. Li Wei pushed the forklift and started working hard, but in fact, this kind of work is relatively simple. A forklift with 3 plows can produce potatoes buried in the soil. Moreover, potatoes are generally densely packed, making it easier to find them. There shouldn't be any problem with this kind of work, just push the small shovel along the furrow, it doesn't have much technical content. But suddenly Levi seemed to realize something was wrong, even though the potato yield was high, it couldn't be wasted. Bending down, he reached out and pulled out a potato the size of a baby's fist, which he found in the soil. Although these potatoes are all at the roots, there are also some that are slightly farther away from them. Continuing to push the shovel forward, after the soil was overturned, potatoes were exposed one by one. Maria followed behind and picked up these potatoes. Li Wei stopped again and bent down to dig out an irregular potato, which could not be wasted. Originally, it was nothing, he just did it naturally. But gradually, Li Wei seemed to realize that something was wrong, even if it was a hindsight, it seemed to be something. He has been staring at the ground all along, but his vision seems to be able to penetrate the soil and roughly see some blurry shapes under the soil. So when pushing the forklift earlier, it was basically very precise. Occasionally missing one or two, he can quickly and accurately find them, and then dig them out. Heaven and earth have a conscience. Those potatoes are buried in the soil, how could they be so easily discovered by him? Standing up straight, Li Wei took a deep breath and stared blankly at the soil ahead. Originally, what caught his eye were the stems and leaves of potatoes, but in the next moment, the dark soil seemed to be visible to him, 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters, until he saw round and blurry lumps. That should be potatoes, right? No, I have perspective eyes. I didn't realize this ability before. Is it difficult because I have worked too much and now I have hallucinations? Feeling a little uneasy, Li Wei decided to study it carefully again and shifted his gaze to the nearby wooden house. Staring intently at the wooden wall, but still unable to discern any secrets until my eyes turned sour, would remain the same. Are you tired? Maria walked over and pointed to the open space next to the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com with a smile. There's juice there, you go take a break. Sergei's teammate immediately joked and said, Levi, if this is just your performance, Alina will definitely not like you. I can also be sure that neither my parents will like you. You are not suitable for living and working here. Li Wei glared at Sergei and said, you better be careful, maybe you'll be calling me brother.in.law soon. If you are willing to stay in Russia, I will consider accepting you as a son.in.law. If you want to take Alina away, I will immediately offer you an invitation to a duel, said the strong man, unwilling to be lonely. Maria pointed to the yard and said, that's also our land. We've already told the children that if they get married in the future, I'll give them land to build houses. Forget it, let's dig potatoes instead. By the way, let me investigate if I really have superpowers. This sight can actually penetrate the soil, which makes Li Wei feel a little uneasy. But more excitement and anticipation, this is a superpower. Maybe it will be very cool. If you can't be a superhero, you may be eligible to develop into a super criminal. If you really don't have that potential, make good use of it and you may find an opportunity to get rich. After all, Li Wei has self-awareness. He knows that his abilities are average and his education is also very ordinary. If there were no special opportunities, he would be more of an ordinary person. It seems like there have been different changes now. If superpowers are true and developed well, it's possible to have some careers and have the opportunity to live a better life. Thinking about it, I'm still a bit excited, but now I need to first study my superpowers clearly. For somewhat fierce Iceberg beauties. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a new discovery, it naturally made Li Wei extremely excited. This is a superpower. So even during rest, he is trying hard to explore his superpowers, which is an opportunity for him to change his life another day. Moreover, if it concerns one's own body, then naturally it cannot be treated casually. Sitting on the porch, Li Wei appeared dazed, just staring at the ground ahead. If there is cement, it cannot be seen through, so there is no other way. If there is a wooden board, it still cannot be seen through, as if only the soil can be directly seen through. Li Wei, who was very focused, was trying new discoveries, and his vision began to slowly penetrate into the soil. In fact, in his field of vision, the soil was also pitch black, but some white shapes slowly appeared in the darkness. It looks like it's just roots. Continuing to try hard, Li Wei felt that his eyes had indeed changed. It was like a CT scanner, which could detect the debris in the soil. But it seems there is also a limit. He can only see around 10 meters at most now, and then it's difficult to reach anything further. And he also needs to worry about using his eyes too much. He can indeed see through the soil with concentrated attention, but it is difficult to maintain it for a long time. However, this is also normal. Even normal people may experience visual fatigue, and there is nothing to say about it. Due to this unexpected discovery, Li Wei felt a bit excited, which was definitely a pleasant surprise. But then he also began to feel a bit distressed, feeling that his vision had indeed undergone a great change. But when it comes to how to make good use of this ability, he can't find much clue now. The first reaction is to search for minerals. Gems, gold, and the like are very valuable. But after much thought, it doesn't seem very realistic. A small character like him doesn't have much capital, and some mines are already owned by famous players. To put it more realistically, those mines are buried deep underground, and he really can't see deeper places. Li Wei, who tossed and turned, was kicked awake by Sergei and could only wake up after rubbing his eyes. Breakfast consists of oatmeal congee, pickled cucumber, and a piece of bacon. In general, it is nutritious and full. The prices in most parts of Russia are relatively low. After all, the overall income is here, coupled with the development of animal husbandry in agriculture. So some people think meat is cheaper, but fruits and winter vegetables are more expensive. Sergei finished breakfast and said, "You need to dress up now. You definitely want to leave a good first impression in front of Alina." Li Wei asked cautiously, "Are you trying to trick me again?" "I'm trying to give you a chance to show off your strength as a man," Sergei said with a thick face. "You can carry more potatoes today. Carrying 50 kilograms will show off your strength. It's easy to say, it's not a problem to carry a weight of 100 pounds, but it's not good to have to travel a long distance. Furthermore, it is difficult to carry when placed in a backpack or bag." Andrei and Maria were just laughing beside them. 50 kilograms was too much. Even though potatoes are more durable to store, they cannot be eaten all at once. Li Wei and Sergei set off, each carrying a backpack of potatoes and carrying some. The total weight is about 50 kilograms, which belongs to Sergei's brother and sister, especially Sergei's brother Ivan, who is living with his girlfriend in Volgograd. Their expenses will definitely be a bit higher. The two of them took a minibus to the city center and first arrived at Ivan's house. Ivan's girlfriend, Siva Anatolyevna Hugova, is at home, and this name is really easy to understand. You can directly know her surname and father's name without checking your household registration. Vanya has already booked the restaurant, and you can go there after work, Siva said happily to Sergei. Alina will also come over, and we have already contacted her. Sergei also got used to it, but still said, "We still want to go home in time. Can we change it to lunch?" Although living in a small apartment, Siva doesn't think there's a problem either. "You can live in the living room, it's summer now. Whether it's with us or with Alina, it's okay." Sergei immediately chuckled and said, "We can't go to Irina's place. My good friend fell in love with her after seeing her photos. I will live with you so that I can protect her." Siva immediately looked at Li Wei and asked, "Are you serious?" Li Wei was speechless and explained, "I just think she's pretty, it's that simple. I don't know her, she doesn't know me, I don't even know if she has a boyfriend, it's just Sergei joking." Siva immediately said, "She doesn't have a boyfriend yet, but there are quite a few people who want to pursue her." When was her last time in love? In high school. In high school, I remember she beat up that unlucky guy, Sergei immediately said. Vanya took me to find trouble with that guy, and then the two of us were beaten up by that unlucky guy's 3 brothers. Upon hearing these, Li Wei couldn't help but laugh, perhaps feeling a bit envious. He is an only child, so naturally he cannot feel these things. After a brief conversation, Siva needs to hurry to work. She works as a cashier at the supermarket. If it were white-collar workers in Moscow, their monthly income might exceed 6,000, but in places like Volgograd, their income would be lower. Siva's monthly income is about 2,000 renminbi, while Ivan works as a second-hand car dealer and her income is not stable, but overall, her income is still decent. And Alina is relatively strong, with a monthly income of over 6,000, and 10 hours of work every Thursday, about 50 days of vacation per year, 100% sick leave salary, and free medical care. The two of them were riding the bus, but Li Wei felt something was wrong. Her job is pretty good, why do you live here? Mainly when he arrived at the apartment building, Li Wei felt that with Alina's income, he should be able to live better, rather than this old apartment that looked very historical. Sergei said angrily, if she doesn't save more dowry, who would be willing to marry her? Sergei's words were taken for granted, but Li Wei was momentarily stunned and immediately reacted. Many people in China feel scalp tingling when they hear about dowries, but the situation in Russia is that dowries are required. It is embarrassing for women to not have enough dowry when getting married, and they will also be looked down upon. That is to say, when getting married, the woman must pay a dowry to the man. However, it is said that the biggest difference between Russian dowries and Chinese dowries is that after the bride pays the dowry, she has an absolute advantage in ownership of property and is greatly protected by law. Li Wei immediately blushed and said, I don't want a dowry, she can consider me. Sergei's expression was strange and he said, that's not possible. Without a dowry, she can't control the ownership of the property. Okay, this is also a characteristic of Russia, where dowries are given but they need to be included in family assets. If the marriage really changes, the woman can take the initiative. Li Wei said foolishly, I think people nowadays are too complicated. They were thinking about divorce before getting married. I think getting married is about thinking about a lifetime, it's about two people forming a family. So I don't have a boyfriend now, I'm very rational. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind, life is long. Who knows what will happen in 10 or 50 years? I long for love, but I won't give up everything for love. Li Wei suddenly turned around, and Alina, dressed in a dark blue police uniform, had a very cold expression. However, although she was wearing a big brimmed hat, a strand of mischievous blonde hair hung down her chin. Even if her face is expressionless, it cannot change the delicate reality of her facial features. Sergei, who was not afraid of big things, immediately said, it's because he wants to pursue you. I never dared to take out your photos when I was in school. I know how much this jerk likes beautiful girls. You are his type, tall and delicate. Alina glanced at Li Wei and took out the key, saying, he's too tender, not the type I like. Li Wei wished he could strangle Sergei. This guy was noticing and didn't remind him, so it was really embarrassing. Alina opened the apartment door and asked, are you staying with me tonight or going to Vanya's place? Sergei opened the refrigerator directly and said, we may live with you, the restaurant is close, and I'm going to take your suitor around Volgograd. Alina nodded and then said, the sofa in the living room has been given to you. You can do whatever you want except for the bedroom. But if this guy enters the bathroom, you need to be cautious. I still have some underwear to wash. Sergei joked, I'll be careful. If he goes in for too long, I'll catch him. Alina looked at Li Wei and then said, time is not a good thing. If he can persist for half an hour, it would be great. If he can last for more than an hour, maybe I will go on a date with him. Li Wei's face turned red and her ears turned red. This Mao girl looked like an iceberg beauty, but she was so fierce in her bones that she couldn't bear it. 5 Digging Party. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Although it was a small accident, there was no problem with it, and Li Wei was still very calm. Because everyone knows that joking is just a joke, as long as it's not going too far, then there's no problem. He and Sergei took a temporary rest with peace of mind, discussing a simple travel plan for tomorrow. Li Wei is quite curious about this city, at least its previous name was Stalingrad. Sergei naturally knows these things, and many people come to Volgograd like this. So his arrangement is to take a look around the monument and statue. Speaking of which, there are nearly 100 monuments and statues in this city. Another famous memorial site is the Mamiev Hill, which was the main battlefield of the Battle of Stalingrad. When the time was almost up, Li Wei and Sergei set off and headed straight for the restaurant. Ivan and Siva have also arrived, and after a brief self-introduction, they can be considered acquainted. He can't drink, Sergei said after sitting down, his life has lost some fun, so all he needs to do is prepare some gas for him. Ivan probably heard Yelena's gossip before, so he joked, then he definitely can't be with Elena. She really likes alcohol. In Levi's view, Jivas is a low-alcohol beverage with an alcohol content of only about 1%. But with his alcohol tolerance, drinking a little more can also make him blush or get a little drunk. It can't be said that you don't drink a drop of alcohol, but you really don't have much alcohol tolerance. The food at the restaurant this time was quite tough, mostly consisting of meat and vegetables. In fact, this time I came to the restaurant, it was a barbecue restaurant. Barbecue is very popular in Russia, and charcoal fire barbecue is very popular, tender and juicy. Although it was introduced into Russia from Turkey in the middle of the 18th century, it has become one of the representative names of Russia. Alina finished work and stuffed her uniform into the car, but her leather boots, pants, and the white shirt on her body all indicate her identity. After glancing at the crowd, Alina said to Sergei, "Can't you take the initiative to leave and let your friend sit with me?" Sergei immediately got up, but still roast, "You just want to sit in a comfortable position, I need to add a chair." Li Wei also felt somewhat helpless and said, "My biggest mistake was joking with Sergei. I have become the subject of everyone's jokes." "I don't care," Alina said directly. "It's very interesting. I can tease shy boys, which will add some fun to my life." Ivan and Siva also laughed, and they all had the same idea, even Sergei. Li Wei's embarrassment seemed very interesting to them. It's so boring not to take the initiative to find some fun for oneself. "Are you sure you want to drink it?" Alina asked, pointing to Jivas in front of Levi. Seeing Li Wei nod, Alina smiled and said, "So after the party, if you're driving, I hope you have a driver's license." This is really true. I got my driver's license first in China after graduating from high school. After arriving in Russia, it took more than 2 years to obtain a driver's license, but I didn't have the opportunity to drive normally. At this moment, Ivan said, "Are you going back tomorrow?" "I'm going to take him on a tour of this great city," Sergei immediately said. "We'll go to the monument, the panoramic museum, and even the Mamiev Hills." Ivan and his team had smiles on their faces, and for many Russians, World War II was their pride. And Russia has also done a good job in this regard, with various commemorative activities constantly taking place, and even some small villages and towns have some small monuments. "Then you can go to my place tomorrow to pick up a car, which will be more convenient," Ivan said with a smile. "This is the first Chinese guest of the Ivanov family, and we must entertain good friends. Eating, drinking, and chatting are some of the meanings of family gatherings." Although I was a bit inexperienced in driving, there were no accidents and I arrived at Alina's apartment smoothly. Looking at Levi and Sergei leaning on the sofa watching TV, Alina wiped her hair and said, "Levi can go take a shower first. I just finished taking a shower, and the steam hasn't dissipated yet. I haven't taken my clothes yet." After joking too much, Li Wei also had immunity. "I suddenly realized that we are not suitable. Your pores seem a bit thick. And I can be sure that your skin is not as good as mine. Alina glared at Li Wei and then returned to the bedroom. The shy boy knows how to resist, so there is no fun. Watching TV, Li Wei suddenly said, Sergei, shouldn't we find something to do throughout the summer vacation? Sergei was quite puzzled. What can we do? I might help at home. When we have work, we do something. When we have free time, we go fishing and swimming. When Alina is on vacation, we can go camping. That sounds great, this holiday arrangement would be very interesting. Li Wei said at this moment, this is Stalingrad, and I know there was an incredibly fierce war here. I heard there is now a profession that excavates firearms, steel, and even the remains of martyrs from the wasteland. The excavator party is also a new profession in Russia. It is common to excavate tanks, landmines, mortar shells, and so on, and it is not very new to excavate the remains of war victims. And some people have indeed made some money as a result. This is also related to the climate characteristics and soil quality of Russia, so many things are well preserved when excavated. Some weapons from World War II are even more sought after by collectors. Upon hearing Li Wei's words, Sergei smiled and said, do you want to dig out a mammoth? Yes, the excavator party is not just active at the site of the World War II battlefield. They sometimes dig up fossils of ancient creatures in swamps, rivers, and so on, which are also favored by some collectors. After joking, Sergei said seriously, you probably don't know that the battlefield of World War II is also protected. We can't dig or destroy it casually. After seeing Li Wei stunned for a moment, Sergei explained, I know some excavation parties are indeed doing this, but many people will apply and register companies. They will engage in public welfare activities such as battlefield excavation and protection in name, and when they find the remains of martyrs, they will contact relevant departments. They also need to turn in some weapons and so on. Okay, the things buried in the soil are really not something that can be dug casually, and this also requires sufficient procedures. Zhaozhuiyuan.com Sergei continued to explain, and you have to understand that most excavators don't make much money. You may not know that the recycling of scrap steel depends on their quality, but most of it is at 10 rubles per kilogram. Although we know that Russia is rich in minerals and used to have developed heavy industry, the price of steel recycling is around 40.50 cents per kilogram. Sergei's expression was serious as he continued, and this profession is very dangerous. You may lose your life due to swamps or rivers. If you find those weapons, it is very likely that they are anti-tank landmines or grenades with intact fuses, which could lead to accidents. That's right, it seems reasonable to say that because some weapons are indeed in good condition. Seeing that Li Wei seemed to waver, Sergei smiled and said, don't forget that we don't have any tools right now. We don't have metal detectors, we don't have cars, we don't have any tools to search for those treasures. Li Wei subconsciously wanted to say that he could see the situation under the soil, which was even more powerful than a metal detector. But it's better not to tell anyone about this secret, just shut up decisively. Although the absence of a detector can be ignored, without transportation, one cannot ignore it. Some of Russia's automotive industries are not very developed, and the once proud Lada has also gained foreign investment. Some entry-level cars may only cost around 60,000 renminbi, but Li Wei can't afford it either. Used cars are cheaper, he can't take them out now. So it's not that easy to become an excavator party, and some of Sergei's words gave Li Wei a hard time. My own plans may not be as easy to carry out, and success is not as easy. Lu Bu Si Shu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It doesn't seem so easy to become an excavator party, and there are many things that Li Wei didn't think of earlier. It seems that he can't continue to worry about these things now, but it also reminds him that he needs to consider things more comprehensively when doing things. Although he did not immediately become an excavator, Li Wei still toured Volgograd under the leadership of Sergei. This city was rebuilt after World War II, clean and beautiful. The tall buildings on both sides of Lenin Street are arranged in rows, and between Volga Riverside Street and Marshal Trekhov Street are green lawns. The Hero Boulevard is lined with poplar, pine, birch, and lilac trees, and colorful tulips bloom in flower beds along the roadside. Although it was just a quick glance, Li Wei's feeling was still good. After a brief tour, Levi returned to Kamasin and Sergei's home. Fishing is definitely not a problem, because Kamasin is located on the banks of the Volga River. The fishing resources in this river, known as the Mother River by Russians, are still very developed, and during the former Soviet Union, it was once half of the fishing volume. And the famous caviar is mostly sturgeon, accounting for nearly 90% of the sturgeon caught in the Volga River in the entire Soviet Union. Li Wei did not catch sturgeon, but caught crucian carp. In fact, he also knew that the water quality of the Volga River was declining, and the dam and reservoir system had blocked and cut off the channels for fish like white sturgeon that lay eggs upstream, which also had some impact. I was quite carefree in my childhood, playing for 3 days in a row, basically just fooling around with Sergei. After dinner, Li Wei lazily teased the Caucasian dog Adam. Andrei sat at the door smoking a cigarette and asked with a smile, "Do you like large dogs?" "Yes, I like large dogs," Li Wei said with some envy. "But I don't have the means to keep a dog, otherwise I would definitely keep at least 2 Caucasian dogs." Andrei suggested, "You should choose to keep a cat as it can bring good luck." This is very Russian. Russians can't walk when they see a cat. Most families also keep cats, believing that this creates a family atmosphere and brings good luck. Even when moving, cats enter the house first. Sergei walked out of the living room and handed Levi a freshly picked tomato, which had been picked from the ground and had been in Levi's stomach for no more than 10 minutes. Green and pollution-free, it really feels good to eat. "This is much better than at school," Li Wei said with a smile. "I rarely see raspberries in my hometown anymore. When I was young, my favorite thing was to go pick raspberries with my peers." Andrei pointed to the door and said, "There are many there, you can pick them anytime, and I like them too." Sergei seized the free labor again and immediately said, "Our job tomorrow is to pick them, and we can store them. Jams and fruits, we all need them." Li Wei didn't say much. He definitely needs to do some work while eating and drinking here. And he also knows some characteristics of Russia. Winter is really too cold, and vegetables are expensive at that time. So many families are accustomed to canned fruits and vegetables in the summer, and most rural families have a cellar where they store canned vegetables, canned fruits, or durable potatoes, and so on. Maria also walked out of the living room and sat on the porch. "Levi, I heard you want to go treasure hunting." Sergei, who has a big mouth, really can't hide any secrets. This guy has almost told everything. Andrei said with some emotion at this moment, "We all know this used to be the turning point of World War II, but now few people mention these things. Those despicable Americans repeatedly promote in movies, which will give future people wrong ideas. The turning point of World War II was in Stalingrad, and we raised the red flag in Berlin. People like Andrei who have experienced the Soviet era will still miss that former hegemon, but now he understands that people no longer see Russia as a red giant, but as a growing neighbor." Maria also said, "My 2 sisters went to Siberia, and my brother went to the Far East. My grandfather's brother died in this land, and no one knows where they became martyrs." Li Wei didn't say much either. The Battle of Stalingrad during World War II was also the bloodiest battle in modern history, with estimated casualties of over 2 million on both sides. Many people have no bones left, and there are also many who have not been buried at all. As for Maria's brothers and sisters, it is also normal that they are separated from each other. No matter when developing Siberia or the Far East, many people have migrated. So now in Russia, many brothers and sisters haven't seen each other for decades. Andrei remembered something and said to Sergei, "Did you take him to the town monument?" Sergei immediately said proudly, "Of course, he really likes that T.34 there. Li Wei really likes the World War II monument at Kamasin, where a T.34 tank that had experienced World War II was parked. This is indeed quite meaningful, and it is also very meaningful to check in at such attractions. André smiled and said to Li Wei, "After my work is over, I will take you hunting." André's job is as a forest ranger, and it seems that he is about to retire. As for hunting, it goes without saying that in Russia, guns are not allowed to be carried. People are allowed to carry firearms, but can only hold hunting guns and partially compliant semi-automatic rifles. However, it is absolutely not allowed to hide handguns and military and police firearms. Li Wei had some expectations and candidly said, "I have been to a shooting gallery before, but I don't have legal procedures, so they won't allow me to shoot." Sergei said nonchalantly, "But you don't have to worry here, we will teach you. You can choose Moxinigan, SVT.40, and SVD. The SVT.40 and the Moxinigan were both the main standard weapons of the Soviet Union during World War II. Moxinigan is also known as the water-linked ball and one-kick, and the early Type 53 in China was modeled after Moxinigan. The SVT.40 is considered by many to be the first truly standard semi-automatic rifle. An SVD is a sniper rifle, the world's first precision shooter rifle specifically designed and manufactured for use by snipers. Li Wei smiled, thinking about it, he still had some expectations. It's normal for men to like weapons. And these 3 guns in Sergei's house are all semi-automatic, and they are all civilian. They may not think there is anything, but in Levi's eyes, this is a relatively new thing. After all, under normal channels, he doesn't even need to think about being able to touch real knives and guns in China. André said at this moment, "You can take him to the forest to practice. If you really start hunting, I don't want to bring a newcomer who doesn't know how to use a gun." Sergei immediately said to Levi, "We don't need to go to the Volga River tomorrow. We'll go practice marksmanship tomorrow. I haven't been hunting for a long time, so I can just practice marksmanship." Li Wei is a bit overjoyed, mainly because there are too many fresh and interesting experiences during this holiday so far. It's better to often come out and take a look. If you don't experience many things, you may feel a bit regretful. Perhaps because he could go shoot, Li Wei appeared a bit excited and got up early. Although he is not good at urging directly, everyone can see his expectations. Sergei was quite speechless. After finishing breakfast, he took out the gun from the room and said, "Now I can only hold them. I don't want to cause trouble." Li Wei naturally agreed with this statement and said, "I understand that I don't want to get a gun, just practice shooting. Speaking of which, his requirements are not high. Now it's just a practice, not to show off with a gun on his back. Even in a small town, some things should be kept low-key. This is to reduce trouble for oneself, and it is also not to add trouble to others." Li Wei naturally knows this principle very well in his heart. Leaving, Li Wei happily followed Sergei towards the edge of the forest, where there were not only a few people but also some people's default shooting range. After all, even if Russia cannot help but shoot, it cannot find an empty space to shoot. 7. There are treasures there. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Probably because he was about to shoot, Li Wei was a bit excited and kept asking shooting questions all the way. Looking at Sergei, Li Wei curiously asked, "When do you plan to serve in the military?" "This year or next year, most likely after graduation next year," Sergei said with a smile, "It's just 1 year. I'm a conscripted soldier, not a contract soldier. In fact, men in Russia are required to serve at the age of 18, and can be exempted under special circumstances." It is obvious that Sergei will not be exempted, and both physical and family conditions are allowed. However, such conscripts usually last for 1 year. Looking at Li Wei, Sergei said, "You don't need to serve in the military. Our population is too large, unless you want to see 300 million regular troops and 500 million reserves," Li Wei said with a smile. "We are volunteers and conscripts, but we are still mainly volunteers." Sergei nodded, completely understandable. If it were a conscripted soldier, having such a neighbor next door would be terrifying to think about. However, even so, it is said that the regular military strength of the neighbor next door exceeds 2 million. At the edge of the forest, Sergei patiently taught Levi some shooting techniques, such as loading ammunition, safety, and stimulation. Some things may seem easy to understand, but it's difficult to achieve. For example, when aiming, Li Wei stands and holds the gun, and is repeatedly reminded to pay attention to his movements. With both hands slightly pushed back, the stock of the gun pressed into the outer shoulder socket. Fortunately, this is not in the military, so there is no need to be particularly particular about it. As long as you master the tricks, it's good. The movements are not particularly standardized and there is no big problem. The most important thing is safety, there should be no accidents. As for marksmanship and so on, it requires diligent learning and practice. Li Wei mostly lacks shooting talent and is not a natural marksman. After firing 10 bullets, Li Wei believed that he had learned how to shoot, but only learned how to do so. Sergei just smiled and didn't say much. Even if he took Li Wei to hunt next, he wouldn't expect him to be so powerful. After the happy hunting ended, the two of them prepared to go back home. Li Wei suddenly stopped walking. These days, he also has a habit of staring at the ground when he has something to do, as if he wants to see through the ground. In fact, that's what happened. He was just staring at the ground, studying whether there were any treasures under the soil. Even if you are practicing marksmanship now, take a look if you have something to do. If it's just tree roots and grass roots, then naturally it's nothing. But Li Wei noticed something unusual, which seemed to have wheels on it. Li Wei had nothing to say and said, "Sergei, don't you think this place looks a bit different?" Sergei looked around and casually said, "I don't think there's anything unusual here. They're all common birch and pine trees, and there's no trace left by wild animals here. So let's go home now, that's the most correct answer." Li Wei didn't give up and said directly, "I think this place is different. This forest looks very special." Sergei sneered and said, "Of course it's special. Long ago, this place may have been a primitive forest, but it has gone through wars and development before, and now these are all artificial forests." "Levi, you don't know about the history here, but I do. This is normal, not to mention Volgograd, even in the Siberian region. Many places used to be primitive forests, but after development and logging, the area of primitive forests decreased and began to become artificial forests." Li Wei pointed to the tree ahead and said, "What about it? How many years do you think it has history?" "This is actually a pine tree, and it doesn't look much different." Sergei looked carefully and said, "I think it may have a history of about 100 years, it's very rough." Knowing the answer before solving the process naturally makes it easier. Li Wei immediately said, "Yes, that's what I mean. Here are mainly birch and poplar trees, but only a few pine trees are here. Don't you think this is very abrupt?" Sergei looked at Levi and asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" "What I mean is that there may be a special mark here, where pine trees have appeared in the birch forest. Isn't that special?" Li Wei immediately said, "I think this must be a treasure left behind by someone, worth exploring." Sergei rolled his eyes and said angrily, "Perhaps this used to be a pine forest, but they were too small to be cut down. When we cultivate the artificial forest, when they grow up, we don't cut them down." This explanation seems to make sense, but there are pine trees in the birch forest, which is not a big deal. Similar things have happened in other places, and Sergei doesn't think this is a special sign. It's normal that Sergei doesn't understand these things, because what he knows is also some common sense, but Li Wei knows there's something buried in the soil. "Believe my judgment, this is a treasure." Li Weiyan chiseled and said, "You may not understand our history. We have thousands of years of history. So some nobles and wealthy people choose special places as their graves, which is called feng shui." Sergei immediately warned, "Levi, we can't dig someone else's grave, it's unethical." In fact, Sergei's resistance is also because some people now have no lower limit. For example, there are various metals in some markets, and it doesn't matter if the channels are legal. But unfortunately, some people have no moral bottom line at all. They even dig up the graves of some elderly people who have participated in wars, or steal from the graves of martyrs. What is it for? That is to say, those metals, especially some valuable ones, are the goals of those people. Li Wei quickly explained, I don't plan on tomb raiding, and I don't like that profession either. Besides, feng shui is useless with you, and some of our concepts are different. What I mean is that based on our history, I can tell that there are treasures here. Sergei smiled and said, treasure. This used to be Stalingrad, and it used to be a ruin. And you may not know, there was also a war here. This place used to be called Cherezin, and Stalin led the Battle of Cherezin here. His army defeated the Cossack White Guards and defended the Soviet Union. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. These Levi's are really unclear, maybe many Russians don't know about them now. Looking at Li Wei, Sergei said, the Battle of Cherezin is already fierce enough, let alone the defense of Stalingrad. Even if there were treasures here, they would have been shattered by artillery fire. Li Wei was puzzled and said, this is not the main battlefield, is it? This is not the main battlefield, but there will be troops stationed here, recuperating, or providing some supplies, Sergei said with a gun on his back. You shouldn't consider becoming an excavator. I don't think you can find any valuable discoveries in the soil. Li Wei was still unwilling and said, that must be a sign, and we can definitely discover it there again. Anyway, we are also idle and have nothing to do now. Why don't we have a treasure hunt together? Sergei turned helplessly and looked at Li Wei. This is the first time, but it's also the last time. I still don't believe there's a treasure there, but I will accompany you to play around once. After this time, don't mention treasure hunting games again. Li Wei immediately said with certainty, deal. We have reached an agreement, and this time we have found the treasure, we will share equally. Let's go back and get the shovel first. Sergei said irritably, I can be sure there won't be any valuable discoveries here. Our next life will be games, fishing, not treasure hunting. That's the thrill of treasure hunting that you don't know now. When you taste the sweetness of it, even if I want to stop, you probably won't be willing. Li Wei is also starting to look forward to it now. He is curious about what kind of good treasure is buried under that pine tree. Becoming an excavator party is not an easy task, it requires gradual development step by step. 8 carriage wheels. Cannon wheels. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Encountering a stubborn friend, Sergei couldn't help it either. However, he can still understand to some extent. He is also a young person, and sometimes he may act impulsively to do things that may seem foolish. If you have done a lot of foolish things yourself, then don't laugh at others. Everyone is of the same level. However, Li Wei was foolish in the treasure hunt, while he was foolish in other things. Anyway, being idle is just being idle. It seems good to find something to do for yourself. And such an experience would definitely make Li Wei shut up and not bring up the matter of treasure mining again in the future. Andre and Maria were too lazy to ask, so they let these young people do what they liked to do. The two of them set off with simple tools, such as shovels. There is no need to come directly with some relatively complete and advanced equipment now. It is enough for the time being. Li Wei is actually a bit nervous, just because he is very aware that his eyes may be different. But whether there can be some gains or not is something that no one can guarantee now. Two people rushed back and forth, carrying shovels and crowbars, and now they focus on being simple and rough. Sergei looked at the pine tree in front of him and joked, "Treasure hunter, it's time for you to play your part now." After pretending to walk around the pine tree, Li Weiji said confidently, "If I wanted to hide the treasure here, I would definitely be some distance away from the pine tree, but not too far. 3 steps, this is the most suitable distance." Sergei dismantled the platform and said, 3 steps. How do I know if I'm going 3 steps forward or 3 steps east? Those are not secrets for treasure collectors, but for us, we need to speculate, Li Wei said with great certainty. Generally speaking, the location of the treasure is not too deep, half a meter, 1 meter, which is the appropriate depth. Sergei said directly, if you find the treasure here, I'll buy you a drink. If you don't find the treasure, you'll buy me a drink. Li Wei immediately looked down upon him and said, you know I don't drink, so whether or not I find the treasure, I'll treat you to a drink. Sergei chuckled and immediately started digging, which was not too difficult work. Li Wei looked carefully and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with the location, and immediately began digging. With a shovel, the relatively soft black soil was shoveled open, and this job didn't seem particularly difficult and didn't require too much effort. This is not a technical job, it seems more like physical labor, and both of them are just digging soil now. Sergei may not feel anything, but Levi is getting more and more excited and nervous because he's about to dig up a treasure. Suddenly, Sergei was stunned, and along with the soil, there was also a piece of wood that looked burnt black. Quickly squatting down to pick up the wooden block, Sergei felt a little excited and said, Li Wei, let's see what we've dug up. Li Wei quickly leaned over to take a look, but didn't pay much attention. It's just a piece of burnt black wood, he said. No, this is not ordinary wood. Sergei quickly corrected, if it's just ordinary wood, it's not like this. Look at its style, it's clearly processed by humans. It seems somewhat similar, with a hole in the middle of the square wood, which really looks like it has been processed by humans. Pointing to the pit under his feet, Li Wei said, my judgment is not wrong, this is just the beginning. Sergei was also instantly excited and happy. I admit you found a valuable place, maybe we can really find some amazing treasures. What else is there to say? Let's continue digging, it's just that simple thing. Because of some discoveries, the 2 men are more motivated now, and they are more energetic when wielding the shovel. Suddenly, Li Wei felt the shovel hit something and quickly shouted, be careful, I dug something. Sergei quickly stepped forward and quickly used his hands to push away some soil. Although there is still a lot of dirt on the wood, you can see the shape of some wheels. Li Wei, we may have really found something good. Sergei was overjoyed and quickly said, dig it out, be careful. This wooden wheel should be a bit crooked, leaning in the mud. However, this is not a big deal. Although Li Wei and Sergei are not students of archaeology, they still have basic knowledge. Now, just a gentle movement is enough. There doesn't seem to be anything particularly important to pay attention to, as long as you're not a fool, you can roughly dig out the wheels completely. The 2 hardworking young men finally dug out the wheel, with a diameter of about 50 centimeters, and the position of the axle should be broken. This wooden wheel, now only the wheel is left. Li Wei looked at the muddy wheel and quickly asked, do you know it? Sergei quickly shook his head and said, this thing seems to have a long history, I've never seen it before. I think it could be a carriage wheel from the Russian era, or some other wheel. Li Wei also thought the same way, but still asked, do you think it's worth it? Sergei became even less confident and said with uncertainty, I don't know. This kind of thing may only be liked by some collectors now, but it may not be worth it. As you can see, it's made of wood. Immediately, Sergei quickly said, Levi, this is not the time for us to study this wheel. We need to continue searching for treasure. Find other components or the real treasure so that we can make money. Yes, a car wheel is really nothing, and perhaps no one is willing to collect it, so it can only be equivalent to waste, or even the kind of waste that no one is willing to recycle, and it cannot be sold for a price as garbage. But if we could dig out a relatively complete carriage or something like that, it would naturally have more collectible value. At this point, there was no need for Li Wei to say anything, and Sergei began to dig hard. He felt that there should be other things here. But Li Wei started paddling, because he looked carefully and found that there seemed to be no other components in the area where the wheels were dug out, as if it was just a single wheel alone. This is a bit of a headache, isn't the other parts just disappearing like this? Li Wei, find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and work quickly. Sergei was very enthusiastic and urged Li Wei to say, remember, we are currently searching for treasure, and we will definitely find other good things. That's really hard to say, at least Li Wei knows that there's basically nothing else to dig up next to this pit. Perhaps he needs to continue to search carefully in order to possibly find some valuable clues. The fact is that even after carefully scanning for a long time, Li Wei still couldn't find any other valuable discoveries. And Sergei dug the pit to a depth of about 2 meters, with a diameter of about 2 meters, but could not find any other components. There is only one wheel with soil on it, and there is really no valuable discovery for the rest at the moment. Forget it, the two of them were also hungry, so they lifted the wheels and walked back. They don't know what this wooden wheel is, nor do they know if it's really worth it, but they can ask someone else. As soon as he got home, Sergei shouted, "Mom, we dug up something good in the forest." Maria walked out of the kitchen and looked at the wheels of the car in the yard. She immediately said, "Did you dig to the battlefield?" "Battlefield?" Sergei asked in confusion, "Isn't this the wheel of a carriage?" "I think it's the wheels of a cannon." Maria immediately said, "Watch more movies." In the era of Tsarist Russia and early Soviet Union, many cannons had such wheels. "Children, where did you dig this guy?" Now Levi and Sergei were even more confused. They both thought it should be a carriage wheel, how could it be a cannon wheel? No, we need to continue asking. If it were really the wheels of a cannon, then things would become interesting. 9 Cossack Cavalry Spear. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I don't know if the wheels of the carriage or the cannon were dug out, but it doesn't matter. As long as there is a good discovery, it is obviously enough, which gives Li Wei and Sergei more motivation. Originally, there was nothing serious about it, but now they have finally found something interesting. Of course, we cannot slack off. A new day has begun, and Li Wei and Sergei set off again, carrying hoes and crowbars, intending to go treasure hunting again. Sergei was full of power and looked around. "Levi, where do you think we should be looking for the treasure now?" After careful consideration, Li Weizi said with some uncertainty, "I think our thinking needs to be adjusted. Our previous judgment was that it was a treasure buried by someone else, but now it doesn't seem to be. According to my understanding, some other components may also be at a similar depth, and the distribution area should not be too wide." "I also think so, but unfortunately we don't have a metal detector," Sergei said with some regret. "We can only use the most foolish method now, so that we can have a chance to find the treasure and find its remaining parts." In Sergei's view, it really can only be like this. Before there are better and more advanced instruments, we can only use clumsy methods. Sergei thinks his suggestion is good, and he seems to have no choice but to do so. But Li Wei doesn't think so. He needs to constantly use his vision to explore the land, hoping to find some clues through scanning. Li Weimo then moved and carefully observed, constantly scanning from near the pit where the wheel was dug out. And Sergei chose to go straight ahead and start digging hard, which seemed more effective. The methods and strategies may vary, but as long as they are effective, it is clearly sufficient. Li Wei looked a bit careless, just constantly wandering around, as if he had no intention of digging. But Sergei didn't say much. He felt that Levi was looking for some potentially special positions. Even if he didn't expect Li Wei to find any clues, after all, with the naked eye, there were no marked areas in front of him. Li Wei's eyes, which were already slightly blurred, suddenly lit up as if he had seen a clue. More than 5 meters away from the unearthed wheel, he saw some contours again. It's not the wheels of the car, but the shape of some gun barrels. Quickly moving forward, Li Wei no longer hesitated and began digging directly. That should be the barrel of the gun. It looks like the wheel that was dug out earlier is really the wheel of the cannon. At the beginning of the 20th century, many field guns were driven by wheels. "Li Wei, have you found anything there?" Sergei asked as he saw Li Wei start digging. Do you need my help? Li Wei straightened up and said with a smile, I don't need it for now. Continuing to shovel the soil with all his might, Li Wei suddenly said, Sergei, come over and help me quickly. I have found something. Upon hearing this, Sergei quickly ran forward and said, What did you find? Fragments. Li Wei immediately said happily, I have discovered fragments, which could be shrapnel or scrap iron. Upon hearing Li Wei's words, Sergei became even more enthusiastic and said, It must be shrapnel. We have found the battlefield ruins. The two of them were digging hard when suddenly a barrel appeared in the black soil, which made them even more excited. There's nothing to say at this point, just dig it out carefully and carefully. Carefully dug out this rifle, although it was rusty, it looked very intact. Even the handguard is still intact, which is not surprising. It is probably not in excessive contact with the air when buried in the soil. We have found the battlefield of the White Guards, Sergei said with a beaming expression as he carefully peeled off some of the soil. Li Wei naturally knew some of the White Guards, which were a force that rose early in the establishment of the Soviet Union. During the Soviet-Russian Civil War, the White Guards, based on the Loyalists, attempted to defeat the Soviet Union after the outbreak of the October Revolution, and they were also relatively strong at one point. Sergei continued to dance. As I mentioned before, Stalin and Marshal Voroshilov led the Battle of Cherezin here, and they defeated General Krasnov of the Cossacks. Li Wei listened patiently, while Sergei continued to explain. The White Army mainly had two parts. One was active on the banks of the Black Sea and the Don River Basin, and most of them were eliminated. Many of them fled to Ukraine, mainly composed of Cossack cavalry. The other part was active in Siberia, and they were originally prisoners of war. Li Wei immediately became enthusiastic upon hearing this and said, Cossack cavalry. No wonder Li Wei is so excited, because Cossack cavalry is indeed very famous. Cossacks are known for their bravery and skill in battle, and were once hailed as the #1 cavalry in the world. Napoleon once said, If there were Cossack cavalry in my army, I would use them to sweep the entire world. Many people imagine Cossack cavalry as the heroic posture of charging forward with a straight sword, carefree and leisurely walking in the midst of gunfire and bullets, bold and unrestrained in eating large pieces of meat and drinking large bowls of wine, singing and dancing on the quiet banks of the Don River, reflecting the campfire. However, in fact, they do not abide by discipline and are unwilling to dismount and fight. Moreover, they are cold and ruthless towards the common people, to the extent that the whole of Europe, whether enemies or friends, hates them. This once famous cavalry began to decline during the Soviet-Russian Civil War, but by the time of World War II, it had been weakened by mechanized warfare and Soviet policies. The Cossack cavalry, which had been glorious for 400 years, had also been completely replaced. M1891. Sergei excitedly cleared the Masanagan, which was about 1,200 mm long. This is a Cossack rifle. Li Wei immediately asked curiously, how can you tell? Sergei explained, there are many models of Masanagan, and one of them is the Cossack cavalry rifle from Zhaozuiyuan.com. Although there are also dragon cavalry rifles, they are usually mobile on horseback and fired from the horse during combat. The Cossack cavalry rifle is not much different from dragon cavalry rifle, but the dragon cavalry rifle has a handguard around the ruler and is equipped with a bayonet, and the Cossack rifle does not have a bayonet, so they do not want to dismount and fight. Sergei carefully wiped away some soil and said, look, this gun doesn't have a bayonet. Li Wei smiled and quickly asked, it looks well preserved. How much do you think it's worth? Sergei couldn't be sure now, although many people like to collect firearms now, the ownership of Mosin is too high. Although there were various models, by the end of World War II, the production of the Mosin rifle exceeded 17 million units. Even some old guns with collectible value, or relatively rare models like Cossack cavalry guns, are actually not particularly difficult to find. And in Sergei's opinion, this gun looks relatively intact, but the handle must be broken, and there may be a big problem with the barrel as well. Seeing Sergei not speaking, Li Wei said, let's go back first and see if anyone is willing to purchase this gun. If anyone is willing, it would be best if we could make some money. Sergei nodded, but then said, we need to be careful not to let the rest of the town know about this. Temporary confidentiality is also very necessary, not necessarily because you are worried about others having red eyes, but simply because you don't want to make unnecessary mistakes right now. The two young people were beaming with excitement, and it didn't matter if they couldn't dig up the other wheel or barrel of the cannon. Digging out a Moxinigan is also a very joyful thing. If it's valuable, that would be even better. 10 may cause trouble. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Wei and Sergei dug up something good, which naturally made Andrei and Maria very happy, and there were also some surprises. I dug up the wheels of the car yesterday, but in reality, it's not much, after all, that thing may not be worth money. But now that we dig out this Cossack cavalry gun that looks quite good, it's a bit different. After careful cleaning, Andrei said, it looks very much like a Cossack cavalry gun, and this inscription can indicate its identity. Li Wei and Sergei quickly leaned in, the gun barrel had. The inscription proves identity. Previously, Sergei made a judgment only because this Moxinigan did not have a bayonet and was 1.2 meters long, which was slightly different from the 1,306 mm infantry rifle and the 1,020 mm carbine. Sergei quickly asked, is it valuable? Andrei thought for a moment, unsure, and said, I don't know about this. Your brother and sister may know about these things. Sergei immediately went to make a phone call, and Ivan immediately announced that he would come back after hearing the truth. After hearing about the incident, Alina also said she would drive back after work and take Ivan along the way. Feeling like a cat scratching their head, Li Wei and Sergei really want to know if there is a market for this gun now. When it was getting dark, a Rada Niva appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. This compact SUV was Alina's car, and the price of the new car in Russia was about 60,000 renminbi, but her car was not a new one. Sergei opened the distant door and excitedly said, we found the best cavalry gun, we're going to get rich. Let's take a look at the guns first, I don't know much about them either, said Ivan, a used car dealer, looking forward. I know some people like to collect these things, but no one knows if they are worth it. After Alina got off the car, she hugged her parents first and then said, I don't know how your guns are, but I know you might be causing trouble. Looking at Alina with a stern face, Li Wei was surprised and said, did we get into trouble? Alina looked at Li Wei and asked directly, do you think what's dug up in the soil belongs to you? Li Wei was stunned for a moment, and then he also realized. Because most of the things in the soil also belong to the country. In fact, this is also the case in Russia. Without legal procedures, the cavalry guns dug up by Levi and his team must also be surrendered. Seeing Li Wei's expression, Alina said, you haven't let more people know about this, have you? Li Wei and Sergei quickly shook their heads, they were still relatively low. Key. That's good, Alina breathed a sigh of relief and said, but it's not a big problem either. Many people will stay after digging up some good things. If it's just a gun, then there's no problem. That's good, as long as it's not causing big trouble, it's naturally a good thing. Ivan carefully inspected the condition of the gun and said, its condition is not good, even if some repairs are made, it will definitely not be able to continue using it. Even if I don't understand these, I don't want to spend a higher price to collect a gun that has no useful value. This is also something that cannot be done. Many people like to keep their collections authentic. And this cavalry gun is mostly just a decoration, which naturally means that the price will definitely be affected. Alina asked, do you have any expectations for its price? Li Wei and Sergei immediately shook their heads, and of course, the higher the expectation, the better. However, they don't really understand these things, so they feel that as long as the price is reasonable, it is naturally acceptable. I'll go contact some people and see if there's a chance to sell it, Alina said when she saw these two people with no ideas. Ivan also said, I'm also going to find some people. I know someone is recycling these items. If it's well maintained or can be repaired, maybe it can be sold at a higher price, Alina said honestly, but we don't know much about these things, and this is also my first time being exposed to them. Everyone seems to have been exposed to these things for the first time, so they don't have many opinions or ideas one by one. What I know is just some common sense, and I can't truly be proficient. Now the main focus is on 3 stinky craftsmen and 1 zhuge. Everyone is a complete outsider, so naturally there is not much understanding. So now we are discussing some things with great enthusiasm, but it doesn't count as much understanding. Ivan was very curious and looked at Li Wei and asked, how did you find that place? Intuition. Li Wei said confidently, my intuition has always been very accurate. I believe there are good things there, so I successfully found them. Sergei said humbly, since you're so precise, can you feel Alina's liking for you now? Staring at Sergei, Li Wei continued to say to Ivan, if this gun can sell for a good price, I will continue to search for treasure. This summer, Sergei and I will both get rich. Alina suddenly said, if you want to continue searching for treasures, you will have a lot of trouble. You are a student visa, and you cannot make money. This statement surprised Li Wei for a moment. In principle, he has a student visa instead of a work visa, so there is naturally a difference. It's definitely not a problem to make a fuss, but if you really want to say that a big tree catches the wind or someone notices it, it's also a hidden danger. Alina continued, if you only sell a rifle, no one will say anything. Look for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but if you find a lot of things next, then you can't do that. Li Wei quickly asked, how can we solve this problem? You can find more treasures first, Alina said irritably. As long as you can find more valuable things, there will always be a solution. I'm just reminding you of the potential risks, and you don't have to worry about those things now. This is also true. Instead of worrying about things here, it's better to think about how to find more valuable and enjoyable things. That's the most important thing, and those are also the top priorities. Find more good things first, then consider other things, and those possible troubles are not really troubles at all. Andre and Maria are happy, and their son and daughter come home less often after work. Normally, returning once a month is not bad. So for them, now that their children have all returned, naturally they are even happier. After preparing a sumptuous feast, Ivan said, after we finish eating, let's go steam a sauna. Steaming a sauna is simply the biggest hobby of Russians, and many families have their own sauna rooms. There are ways to steam sauna in winter, and there are also ways to steam sauna in summer. Sergei immediately said, okay, I'll go prepare right away. Li Wei naturally has no objections, simply following the guest's wishes. As for the steam sauna, he is also used to it. Although he sometimes roasts that the Russian sauna is too tough and hardcore, it is not a big problem. It's good to get used to it, even now I feel comfortable all over after the Russian sauna. This is probably just doing as the Romans do when in Rome, and Li Wei doesn't think there's any problem. Eating and drinking enough to steam a sauna is also a kind of enjoyment.